Okay, so right now I'm going to go over 6.3, solving quadratic equations by factoring. Now, I'm not worried about 6.1 and 6.2 we skipped. 6.1, if you posted, that's fine, I'll give you credit if you did something. 6.3, if you've already posted, that's great. If not, this will go over some things. I'm going to do 6.4 and 6.5, and what I'm going to do also is this week I'm going to post worksheets uh, for 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5 that you can also do for credit and to help practice. And they'll be the study guides that have some examples on them as well. Okay, and then I'm going to make out a test, and I'm going to work through the problems on a practice test. And then, like I'm going to go over stuff here. Okay, I'm going to go over a few problems here, then and post this. Okay, so 6.3, solving quadratic equations by factoring. So first of all, we need to talk about the zero product property. If two things are multiplied and it equals 0, then at least one of those things must be 0. It has to be. That's the only way you can get 0. So for instance, AB equals 0, A times B. Well, either A is 0 or B is 0 or both. Okay? This possibility is both could be 0. Okay? So we have to treat it like both could be 0. That gives us a way to solve for what's called the zeros of a quadratic equation. Where the zeros are is also called, again, that's the x-intercepts, or the roots. That's where that graph, that parabola, so if you have a parabola here, here, and here, these are the zeros. Okay? That's where it crosses the x-axis. Okay? Alright. So for instance, if x plus 5 times x minus 7 equals 0, then x plus 5 equals 0 and x minus 7 equals 0. We have to treat both to possibly be 0. So anytime you have things multiplied together and it equals 0, you can set each factor equal to 0 separately. Alright, that's how we're going to solve these, by factoring. We're not going to see them like this usually. They're going to have to be factored first. Okay, and so when factoring, always try the greatest common factor first. You always look, do they all have something in common? Okay? Then before factoring, you make sure your equation equals 0 or it won't work right. You have to get everything to the other side of the equal sign and only 0 on one side. Alright? Otherwise it doesn't work right. Alright. And again, if you get something like this, when you factor x minus a times x minus a, okay, you could say, well, x minus a equals 0 and x minus a equals 0, or you get x minus a and that is squared. These are saying the same thing. Okay, this is this. Alright, then a is a double root. It also is said to have a multiplicity of 2. Okay? Alright, a multiplicity of 2. And what happens is it doesn't actually end up crossing at that point. Okay, what will actually end up happening is it'll bounce off the graph at A, whatever A is. Alright? Now, if given the two roots of a quadratic function, you can go backwards to find out the function. Okay? It's going to have some problems like this. So instead of starting with, you know, x squared minus 5x plus 12 or whatever, you start with, you know, x equals 2 and x equals negative 5. Or f of x has roots of 2 and negative 5. What is f of x? What's the function? Okay, well, we know x equals 2 and x equals negative 5. That we know. Get them equal to 0. So move the 2 over. X minus 2 equals 0. And x plus 5 equals 0. Multiply those two factors together. And that's how you get back to your original function. So you're learning this forwards and backwards. Okay, you gotta be able to go both ways with this. Alright? So, solving equations by factoring. Number 16, and this is on this page here. Yeah, and here are the answers. All I have is my teacher's manual to show you the book. Okay, so there they are. All right. Now I can show the worksheets that I'm going to show you won't have the answers on them. Okay, but I can eventually post those too, but I'm going to want y'all to try those first. Okay, so solve each equation by factoring. I'm going to start with number 16 here. X squared equals 25. Okay, it's not equal to 0, so you have to get it there. Okay, so you subtract 25 from both sides and get it to this. All right. Then you have to factor. Now what you need to do is remember this is a difference of two squares. Okay? A squared is x squared and b squared is 25. So a equals x and b equals 5. And remember, a squared minus b squared factors to a minus b times a plus b. Right? Okay, you got to remember those ways we learned how to factor. Alright, so we have x minus 5 times x plus 5 equals 0. Set each factor equal to 0. X minus 5 equals 0, so we add 5 to both sides, we get x equals 5. X plus 5 equals 0, you subtract 5, and you get x equals negative 5. These are your answers. Okay? You can have a maximum of number of answers as you have the highest power of x. The degree of your function determines how many roots it could have, zeros it could have. So x is squared. The highest power of x is 2 because it's a quadratic. All these are. They're going to have a maximum of 2. It could only have one answer. It could have no answers. And when I say no answers, I mean imaginary answers. Okay? We're not going to worry about that just yet. Alright, just let's work with the reals right now. Alright, number 20. And screw up there, sorry. Okay, so 3x squared equals 5x. Not equal to 0. Get it there. You subtract 5x from both sides. Okay? 0 equals that. Greatest common factor. What's the greatest common factor here? X. You factor x out of both of these and you get 3x minus 5. Okay? You set each factor equal to 0. X is equal to 0. Well, that's one answer. We're done. And 3x minus 5 equals 0. Add 5, divide by 3. X equals 5/3. Okay? Factor. Here, greatest common factor was all you needed to do. Alright, you set each factor equal to 0. The first one is just done for you. X equals 0. That happens. Alright. Now, number 26. Alright, so it was, and let me rewrite that. I made that messy. It was supposed to be 3. I had screwed up the problem. 4x squared plus 8x equals a negative 3. So I added 3 to both sides to get it equal to 0. That's the first thing I had to do. Alright? Alright, now, this is a quadratic, and A is 4, B is 8, C is 3. A does not equal negative 1, so we got to do it the long way of factoring. Okay? So, 4x squared plus blank x plus 3. Okay, you split that middle term into 2, and we do that A times C method. A times C, 4 times 3, is 12. What factors of 12 add up to be 8? 2 and 6. 2 and 6. That's what goes in those blanks. Then you do your greatest common factor of each of these. Okay, this is just review of factoring quadratics, okay? So, then 2x plus 1 is what they have in common. So you got to factor that out. And so you get 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 3 equals 0. And then you set each of those equal to 0 separately and solve. So minus 1, divide by 2. Oops, that's a negative 1/2. Excuse me. Alright, and then minus 3, divide by 2, negative 3/2. Okay? Got to remember how to factor these. Alright? Alright. Writing a quadratic equation given the roots, again, when one of the roots is a fraction, you have to move numbers around a little differently. Okay, because you don't want, you could just move it over by adding or subtracting, but it doesn't look quite right. So here, roots are 1 over 2 and 3. All right? You get each equal to 0, then multiply together. Okay? So, x equals 3 for my first factor. Subtract 3 from both sides. That's my first factor I'm going to be multiplying by. My second one, x equals 1/2. When you have a fraction, you're going to multiply by the denominator first. Okay? So I get 2x equals 1. Then I subtract 1. Okay? And so I get 2x minus 1 equals 0. That's my second factor. All right? And you multiply those two together by FOIL, first outside, inside, last. And you get 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 equals 0. And that's your function. Okay, so in the end, you don't want fractions here. You want it in terms of a, b, and c being integers, no fractions. So that's how you do that. When you have a fraction as a root, you multiply by the denominator first, then you move the number over by addition and subtraction. Okay, now that is the basis, and this was number 38, by the way, of, and I definitely rewrote it. Okay, that is 6.3, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a study guide worksheet like I used to give y'all in class. Y'all work on that. I want you to try that. That's going to be your new assignment. Okay, I'm going to reopen this 6.3 to 6.5 anyway, but this is your new assignment for this week, and I'm going to do that for 6.4 and 6.5, and I'm about to record the next section right after this.